Shalom. I want to give our honors and glories and praises to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Wakakodash, Yahweh, which is the one true name of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one true name is Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, meaning coming in the name, Ba means coming in, Ha means the, Sham means name, Rakah meaning spirit, Kodash meaning holy. Peace, blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect, and shalom to you sincere brothers that are scattered abroad, pushing forth this word in truth and sincerity. And shalom to you sincere sisters that are listening in silence, as the scriptures command you to do so. I am the brother Mashiach Harazakah, and pretty much this lesson is going to be titled as that Greek SyroPhoenician woman, and that's mentioned in Mark 7 and 26. She was an Israelite. All right, that Greek SyroPhoenician woman that's mentioned in Mark 7 and 26, she was an Israelite. Okay, now you got these wacky-tacky Christians. They're pretty much coming to the camps, and they're going to Mark 7 and 26. All right, the woman that had the daughter that was possessed by that evil spirit, right? And the Lord wound up taking off that evil spirit from that SyroPhoenician woman's daughter, right, that was possessed with that devil. And as mentioned in Mark 7 and 26, she was called a Greek SyroPhoenician. She was an Israelite. Okay, she was not a heathen. All right, she was an Israelite. But you got these wacky-tacky Christians. They'll use Mark 7 and 26 to try to justify and say that she was a heathen, a natural heathen. Knowing that when you really look at Mark 7 and 26, Mark chapter 7 verse 26, and literally read it, all right, through the correct understanding through the spirit, you'll understand that she was an Israelite. All right, and we're going to prove that in this lesson, that when you go to Mark 7 and 26, that Greek SyroPhoenician woman was an Israelite. Okay, and we're going to prove that in this lesson. So, Lord willing, this lesson is edifying to those of you, that are new in this truth. And this is Mark 7, and we're going to start at verse 25. Mark 7 and 25. It says, for a certain woman, it says, whose young daughter had an unclean spirit, heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. Right? Verse 26. And it says, the woman was a Greek, a SyroPhoenician by nation. It says, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. So it says the woman was a Greek and SyroPhoenician. But what we know here of the correct understanding is that the woman was neither an Edomite nor was she a Canaanite. All right, but she was an Israelite. All right, and we're going to keep reading down. Verse 27. But Yahweh Shai said unto her, let the children be filled. It says, let the children be filled, right? And Yahweh Shai is talking about Israel here, where it says, let the children. It says, and Yahweh Shai said unto her, let the children first be filled. All right, Yahweh Shai is talking about the nation of Israel, talking about Israel right here. All right, and it says, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it onto dogs. The dogs are the other nations. Okay, the dogs are referring to the heathen. All right, it's all about Israel, and we know that the scriptures don't contradict themselves. Yahweh Bashim Shai is only dealing with Israel. Okay, the Lord Yahweh Bashim Shai is only dealing with Israel, man. All right, he's only dealing with Israel. Verse 28, and it says, and she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. Verse 29, and he said unto her, for this saying go thy way. It says the devil is gone out of thy daughter. So eventually the Lord healed the woman's daughter, and we know the Lord is only dealing with the Israelites. All right, the woman was an Israelite. Okay, we're gonna prove it, because when you go to Acts 16 and 1, right, it mentions of Timotheus' father being Greek, right? But we know and understand when we go into it that his father was called a Greek because he was an unbeliever. Okay, he didn't believe in the ministry. He didn't believe in the truth. So he was called a Greek, but he was an Israelite. Okay, so let's go there. This is Acts 16 and 1. It says, then came he to Derbe and Lystra, And behold, a certain disciple was there named Timotheus, which Timotheus, he was a Israelite. Okay, it says the son of a certain woman, right, which was a Jews, right, and believed, but his father was a Greek, and his father was called a Greek because his father, he didn't believe in the truth. He didn't believe. All right, but he was an Israelite, but he was called a Greek. All right, so that's talking about, Paul, when he was, on ones of his own journey, right? And Derbe and Lystra was a place up there in Asia Minor, which is now called Turkey. All right, but Asia Minor, that's what it was back in the ancient world. It was called Asia Minor, right? Which at that time was ruled by the Romans, right? And we know Timotheus was an Israelite. Okay, so Timotheus, he was an Israelite, right? But his father, he didn't believe. Therefore, the scriptures called him a Greek, right? So when you look up the word Greek, right, it goes into G1672, which we can get right now. When we go into the meaning of the word Greek there, it goes into G1672, right? Which that word Greek, it means Hellenic, right? Which goes into what? Hellenic, right? And it says a Greek, neither by nationality, whether a native of the land, right? The mainland, so like whether a native of a mainland or of the Greek islands or colonies. You see that? You see that there? So he was called a Greek because he didn't believe, right? So for the woman, right, the Greek SyroPhoenician woman, that word Greek there, it goes into the scripture. It says Hellenes, right? So we can go to there too. We're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to Mark. So like it, bear with me. Mark 7 and because we read 26, right? Now when you go into the meaning of that word Greek, right? So that word Greek in the man's form is Hellenic. In the female form for Greek is Hellenes, right? You see that? It's Hellenes. So the Sario, so for the woman, right, the Greek SyroPhoenician woman, as the scriptures say, it says Hellenes, right? Hellenes is a female form of Hellenic, and that's what Timotheus' father was. He was a native of the Greek islands of colonies. All right, he was up there in Derbe and in Lystra. Okay, so Timotheus' father was not circumcised. He was of the uncircumcised Israelites. He was an Israelite foreigner. He didn't believe, so he was called Greek. But when you go to the female version of the word Greek, right, it's Hellenes. So she was an Israelite. She just lived in the lands. All right, she pretty much learned the customs of the Greeks. So she was called Greek SyroPhoenician, right? But she was an Israelite though. Okay, so she learned the customs of the Greeks. So she was called Greek, right? Greek SyroPhoenician, right? So we're gonna go get the definition, right? And you see that right there. When you go into the meaning of the word SyroPhoenician, it goes into G4949, right? G4949, right? And it says SyroPhoenicia, exalted palm, the name of a mixed nation, half Phoenician and half Syrians, right? So she was a female version of an Israelite foreigner who took up the Greek customs, right? A native, someone who stayed up where the Edomites, where the Edomites were, right? Who are the Greeks and the Romans, all right? They ruled. So now we're going to break down, because I read the definition of Syro, right? Phoenician, which goes into Syro-Phoenicia, right?
Strong's G 4949 SyroPhoenicia.
Right, which we're breaking down right here, right? And the word for Syrophoenician is SyroPhoenicia, right? Which means exalted palm, all right? The name of a mixed nation, half Phoenician and half Syrians, right? So when you look up SyroPhoenician, right, which we're gonna get it right now. Actually, we could just look that up, right? And we're gonna put that in Syro. Bear with me. Syro. I want to make sure I'm spelling it right. SyroPhoenician, right? When we look up that meaning, you see that? Look what it says. It says SyroPhoenician refers to someone native to the region of Syria when it was part of Roman province of Syria, or a native of the Roman province of SyroPhoenician itself. So she was called SyroPhoenician, right? Because the land, she was native to the land and inhabitant of Phoenicia when it was part of the Roman province of Syria. So that's why she was called Greek SyroPhoenician, because she was an Israelite who learned the Greek way, the Greek customs. She was called Greek, and she was called SyroPhoenician because she lived in the inhabitants of Phoenicia, which was a Roman province of Syria. So she was called SyroPhoenician, but she was an Israelite. You see that? She was an Israelite. So you got those two words, right? Syria and Phoenicia mixed together, which make SyroPhoenician, right? But that's all it was saying about this woman, back in Mark 7:26. She was an Israelite, okay? But she was called Greek SyroPhoenician, right? And the reason why she was called that, because she was part of a native or inhabitant of Phoenicia when it was part of Roman province of Syria. You see that? So this lady was an Israelite, a woman who took up the Greek ways, okay? Who took up the Greek customs. All right. She also, again, was an inhabitant of Phoenicia when it was part of the Roman province of Syria. See? But by Yahushua healing the daughter goes to show you that she was an Israelite. All right. She was not an Edomite. She was not a Canaanite. Right. She took up the Edomite customs at the time. And at the time, they were called Greeks. Right. They were called Romans. Right. And she was pretty much native. All right. She was native to the habitant of the land of Phoenicia at that time. All right, and it was part of Rome. It was part of the Roman province of Syria. So that's why she was called Greek SyroPhoenician. So when you go back, we're gonna go back. So she was an Israelite. Okay, she was called that because she lived in the habitant. She was native to the inhabitants of the land of Phoenicia. Okay, so she was called that, right, which was a Roman province of Syria. So that's why she was called Greek, a SyroPhoenician. All right, but she was an Israelite. So let's read that again. Mark 7:26. It says the woman was a Greek, a SyroPhoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. So she was an Israelite. She was called Greek SyroPhoenician because she took up the Greek customs. That's why she was called Greek. Okay, she learned the Greek way. But she was an Israelite of the flesh, but she learned the Greek way, so she was called Greek, and she was called SyroPhoenician because she was native and inhabitant of the land of Phoenicia when it was part of the Roman province of Syria. So that's why she was called Greek SyroPhoenician, but she was an Israelite. Okay, she was an Israelite. So when you go to Mark 7:26, she was an Israelite there. Okay, again, when you go into the meaning of the word of Greek and the female, it goes into Hellenes, right, which is a female version for the word of Hellenin, which is Greek, right? So she was an Israelite of the flesh. She learned the customs of the Greeks, and she pretty much was in the land and a native to inhabitant of the land of Phoenicia, which was a Roman province of Syria. So that's why she was called Greek SyroPhoenician. So she was an Israelite of the flesh, right? And she learned the way of the Greeks, and she was pretty much native to the inhabitant of Phoenicia, which was a Roman province of Syria, man. Okay? So, hey, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. So again, when you go to Mark 7:26, that woman was an Israelite. She was not a heathen. Okay? She was an Israelite. Right? And again, when you read through the scriptures, the Lord healed that SyroPhoenician's woman daughter that was possessed by a devil. And the reason why he healed her was because she was an Israelite. Okay? And we proved it. That's why we went to Acts 16:1, going into Timotheus's father being called Greek. He didn't believe in the ministry. He didn't believe. So he was called a Greek, but he was an Israelite. And we know that Timotheus was an Israelite. And his father lived in Lystria and Derbe, which that's in Asia Minor, which is now called Turkey today. Okay? So, again, when you go into the scriptures and you read about Mark 7 and 26, that Greek SyroPhoenician woman, she was an Israelite, man. Okay? She was not a heathen. She was an Israelite. So, hey, hopefully this lesson was edifying. On to the next one. Shalom.